1 year on Cleopatra, Walter Wanger. Hope second year is be happy as the first. Yeah, let's fast forward. It wasn't. So for whatever reason, my family had a little moment during the pandemic in 2020, triggered, I guess, mostly by David Fincher's film Mank, about my grandfather, Herman Mankiewicz. Even though my brother and I had absolutely nothing to do with the movie, we ended up doing a fair amount of press for it, which, got us both sort of thinking about the family's history. By the way, I loved the movie. I was very moved by the film. And then we started talking about it. And right around that time, a book came out. Sidney Stern wrote a book called The Brothers Mankiewicz about the complicated relationship between Herman, who was the sort of more loved brother by the world, and Joe, who was by far the more successful younger brother, and the burden he had of having Herman as an older brother. And then, meanwhile, my cousin has been working on his book about the two brothers for much longer, and that came out not long after. My cousin Nick Davis wrote Competing with Idiots. Nick Davis is also Herman Mankiewicz's grandson. I'm pretty close to Nick. So when Angela Carone, who runs our podcast unit, suggested that we, after she'd met Nick, that maybe we could do Cleopatra, that maybe we could get access to some of the recordings that Nick had with people and that Nick had come up with. And how did I feel about that? And as always, I was like, oh, that's a good idea. And then the more I thought about it, the more I recognized how uncomfortable's the wrong word. I don't want to overstate it or be all dramatic, but that I would have to sort of confront some preconceived notions I had about Joe. And I was certain that they would be proven wrong. A big part of that turned out to be Joe's contemporary diaries from the making of Cleopatra. I mean, I have here in front of me his diaries from 1961, 62, 63, and 64. 61 when he got the job. 64 is after Cleopatra's come out. Those are interesting to read for a whole different reason. It's the first sign of the effect that the movie had on Joe. And sure enough, of course it did. What these diaries do, Joe was pretty diligent about keeping a daily diary of what he did, and there's some thoughts included in there, some thoughts and feelings. And then there's sometimes, like anybody else, 2 months would go by, he wouldn't write a damn thing down. There's something incredibly mundane about a person's diary that reminds you that these people who created, these movies that have moved so many of us, they are just like us, but they were just incredibly creative, but they're hardly immune from any of the regular suffering that we go through. And then you just get these great little moments where, dinner with Preminger and Wyler. Otto Preminger, Joe Mankiewicz, William Wyler having dinner. Like, there's no way that's not interesting. And here's what changed mostly about how I thought about Joe. I'm much more compassionate toward the idea of Joe, and I ache for him. Like, he loved doing what he did. He was cynical about it in probably the right way. And this movie nearly wrecked him. I'm really proud of this podcast and proud to have been a part of the team that put this together. And to be able to look through these diaries and get a real sense of who Joe was changed how I look at Joe. I had a very simplistic way, I think a lot of us in the family did. Herman was the fun, tragic figure, and Joe was the guy who played the Hollywood game. It's so silly. Herman wrote the greatest movie ever made, Citizen Kane, and Joe directed the worst movie made, Cleopatra. It's so dumb I don't even like saying it anymore, right? And then Cleopatra was an unbelievable burden that in some ways ruined his professional life. I mean, essentially, after Cleopatra, from 1963 until Joe died 30 years later, he didn't write anything. He had writer's block. All of it caused by the enormous stress and weight of Cleopatra. This is a guy who wrote All About Eve, Letter to Three Wives. This is one of the great writer-directors in Hollywood history. I ache for Joe in a way I didn't. He's a real hero of the story, I think, Joe. Just getting the movie done. That's impressive. He led a very, very interesting life, and clearly a lot of people really respected Joe. I wish I'd been easier on him in my head. But I'll start now.